What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the H Panel, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. Before we get into my guest today, I just officially wrote my last exam for my undergrad at university. Woo! I am now officially the smartest guy I know. Please don't take that seriously because it is absolutely not true. My university experience on the academic side was it was very much like a roller coaster. There were some highs and there were a lot of lows. I failed multiple classes. So if you're listening to this and you're struggling right now or you're in the pits, don't worry. Do not give up because it is possible. If I can do it, you sure as hell can. So for this episode today, I am joined by Ben Moroski. Ben is an LA Drama Critics Circle Award nominated writer and actor. He advocates for those who are going through or have previously gone through the world of self-injury. Now, I know a lot of my interviews cover some pretty heavy topics, but I would like to implement a trigger warning on this one. We do get into depth about the topic of self-injury, and if that's something that, may potentially trigger you, please, I will not be offended if you don't listen to this episode. It is completely okay. Additionally, I will put some links to mental health resources in the bios down below in the instance that you do listen to this and get triggered by something. And I want all of you to know that you are very loved, you're never alone, and I am just a DM away if you ever need to reach out to somebody. Now, before we get into the episode, please, if you're listening to this, like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on a podcast platform, share with someone who might need to hear this episode. It is a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great day. Peace. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel. We are live. Ben, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Before we get started here, I wanted to kind of dive into your story a little more. So where does your story with mental health, where does that kind of start?
Um, you know, Probably, formally, when I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school, I started cutting. And that's been something that I've dealt with off and on since then. And I'm 33 now. So yeah, it's been about 15 years off and on. I'm in a healthy place at this point, but I can't say that it's not something that you groove something as your coping mechanism for enough years, and it's going to be the first thing you think of to do, whether you act on it or not. So yeah, high school was when things started, but I think I can probably, if I wanted to, trace things back much earlier, just as far as the mental side. There's always the nature versus nurture question. How much of it is just who I am and how much the environment that I grew up in. So yeah.
hmm Yeah, man. Well, I'm glad you're in a good place now.
Yeah, thanks.
Because obviously, it's hard, especially with all the things going on right now. It's kind of hard to find that good place for a lot
Oh
of
my
people.
God, yeah.
Like to say it's tough is kind of an understatement. Um,
Yeah, I think it's definitely, for me, I mean, I've noticed it in my life where it's the coronavirus restrictions and being isolated from other people. It's, if nothing else, it's exacerbated issues that were already present, or brought stuff back up. I feel like it allows the whatever your button is, it's pushing on that button, so that's sort of how I've seen it manifest for me.
Yeah, no, I was talking to a psychologist, and he put it a great way. He was saying that this whole thing has been kind of like an incubation period for people
Mm,
or an incubator, because you're throwing people into their houses with no distractions, and it's kind of just them. They have to face who they are, and that can be a great thing, but it can also be a really terrifying thing. Um,
yeah.
like I know when I so my whole thing kind of really got elevated in when I went off to uni, because when I was in high school I had all these distractions. Um,
Sure.
I was on the rugby team, I was on the swim team, I was doing extra, like everything, just to keep my mind off of itself. And then when you get to uni, you're kind of stuck by yourself, and you're like, oh shit, like I'm pretty messed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was the, it was funny, even in high school where I did have a lot of distractions, it was still, I grew up in a pretty repressive, religious environment. Um, so I think I was looking for ways to cope with that when I was in high school. I mean, I was the captain of the football team. I was the starting quarterback. I was a straight A student. I was, doing all the right things. And yet, despite that, there was still pressures from the outside, pressures from the inside that I didn't know how to cope with, and for whatever reason, self-harm became my coping mechanism. It wasn't that I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anyone who'd done it. But I just kind of found it. I grew up in an environment where everything was a sin, so it was like drugs and alcohol were off limits, sex was off limits, everything, and I've always been a great rule follower. Um, so I didn't cope. I didn't feel like I could cope in any of the ways that were available. So I found something else,
Right.
or it found me. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So what like, because I've personally, I've never self-harmed, but I know a lot of friends who have, um,
Yeah.
especially in high school. But what goes through someone's mind when they're going through that? Because I feel like, you know, I don't know, the whole self-harm topic is kind of, there's like this dark cloud over it. And it's like, oh, you're just immediately thrown into the whole crazy label when you
Yeah.
experience something like that. So what goes through your mind when you're going through those moments?
I think that's a great question, and obviously, I can only speak from my personal experience. I think it's definitely shifted for me over the years, and even shifted. It's and continues to shift. It's not like it stays one thing. I think initially it was, you know, a sense of control was driving it, and also a sense of self punishment for things that I did wrong. Um, and over the years it's shifted more to, I think that control piece still stays, has stayed, but I think it's also shifted to, um gosh, I don't exactly know how to put it. It just is a coping mechanism. There's an endorphin release when you experience pain, and so there's is a sense of like getting high, but as far as, I don't feel like I'm answering your question exactly. As far as answering your question, what goes through my mind? Yeah, I mean, it's God. Um, what goes through my mind is any number of things. I don't. I agree with you that there is like this dark cloud around self harm, self injury, as far as like the way it's labeled. It's still, I think, one of the, in my opinion, it's still one of the things that's most taboo in a subject matter, so mental health, that still is, plagued by taboos on its own. But self-injury seems to have its own sort of corner on the, dark corner within the whole thing. So um yeah, I don't know that I'm answering the question, but um,
There's
if
just
I,
a lot of things going on, a lot of
yeah,
thoughts. Yeah.
yeah, I think it varies. I think yeah, it definitely varies. I think sometimes it's just about releasing frustration, or a distraction, or yeah, I think sometimes it is still self-punishment, and that frustration about and that control piece, and like things seem to be spinning outside of my control. So therefore, if I focus on this one thing, it brings me back to some sense of center. And in that way, I feel like it's a lot like anything else that people do to cope with, to any negative coping mechanism that people use. It's not so aberrant as people like to make it out. It feels that way because it's so visual, and the scars are, and the wounds are visible, and can be scary, you know. But by the same token, there are so many things that people use to cope that are damaging, in their own way. So I don't like to think of it as being, I think there is a dark cloud over it, but I think that's a misrepresentation. And I think it's a misrepresentation that just springs out of, people being naive about it, or just not knowing about it, which isn't their fault. And that's why I love, doing stuff like this and coming on and talking to you, because it's, the awareness. I think that, people say awareness is the first step to changing. And I think awareness really for me is the only step, and it's more about awareness as a verb, and it's constantly changing and growing, and going forward and sometimes backward, but it's a living, breathing thing. So if we can increase that around something like self-injury, just by talking about it, regardless of how articulate or not I end up being, it's still a worthy topic to discuss. And I think it's necessary, because there's so many people still, living in the shadows, with it. You want to talk about a dark cloud? It's the people who are stuck in hiding, who are dealing with it. And I feel for those people, because I was one of them for years and years and years. And it's only been through a lot of other years that I've been comfortable enough to, wear short sleeves and talk about my story. And yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel like there's also like this, because with mental health and mental health struggles and suicidal thoughts and depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, like everything, it's not a visual thing. It's something that happens
Yeah.
in your brain, and like sometimes it comes out in like the way you react to something, or your mood or your energy. But with self-harm, it's like a visual representation of what's going on in your brain, and people just for some it's just the lack of understanding and the lack of communication. Like they see that, and it's like almost a panic, or like an uncomfortable feeling almost. They just
Oh
don't know how to
yeah.
register it.
Well, and I mean, I'll speak to that, as far as, just because it's something that I've dealt with doesn't mean I know how to cope with it when other people are dealing with it.
Hmm.
You know, it still is scary to me.
Right.
And just because there is something inherently, you know, I know for me dealing with it myself, it's like there have been a lot of moments when I've been scared dealing with it myself. You know. In moments when I'm going through it. It's it's scary and it's lonely. Um and that kind of abject loneliness in that moment is really sad. And I don't mean sad in a judgmental or pejorative way. I mean, like, I feel it makes me sad, when I'm in that moment. Um so Yeah, I think sort of being able to reach people and let them know that they're not alone, is really important, because just in my experience, there's a really, like, palpable, like, to the bone sense of loneliness, in those moments.
Yeah, I agree. That's another thing. This is why I love that we're talking about this, because people who don't understand it or don't get it, they also don't get the fact that like it's not like you don't want to be thinking that way or reacting this way. Like for me, I used to get blackout angry, or
Uh-huh.
whenever I'd react to anything, I'd punch lockers, punch walls, I'd bang my head against the wall. bleeding everywhere. But I didn't choose to, like, I would black out and then I'd come back to and people would just label me as a hothead. Like they would be like,
Yeah.
"Oh, why are you doing that?" The whole "why are you doing that?" It's like, okay, well, listen, like I'm not actively wanting to do this. It's a cry for help almost, and it's like, please, I need resources.
Well, and the term cry for help has been so misappropriated where it's like it's viewed as, it's used in such a condescending manner, and my opinion is, hey, if someone's crying for help, maybe they fucking need help, and maybe you should listen.
Facts. Yeah.
Maybe you should listen to the cry for help, um regardless of what the judgments you have around it.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. So that was actually another question I wanted. You mentioned, and I want to ask about your whole play, this vicious minute. Sorry.
Yeah.
You had a quote on there. Let me just pull it up for a second. Where you said, like, I think most cutters are people like me, people just trying to survive. Why is it that when someone does this quote unquote cry for help or has visible scars, why do we isolate and shame them as opposed to going, "Hey, do you need help?"
I think honestly it's because it's something people don't understand, and we're afraid of things we don't understand. Again, I think it's a great thing why, you're doing what you're doing, and the things I've tried to do about raising awareness. I think we isolate and shame the things that make us afraid, and we're afraid because we don't understand them.
Mm,
And if we can raise our understanding, then we have a chance. If we can raise our understanding, we have a chance to raise our empathy level.
yeah. Yeah, and here's the other thing is like it like what you're saying, what I'm trying to push, like you don't have to get comfortable about it, but it
Oh my God,
yeah,
no! I think getting comfortable about it probably isn't. Shouldn't even be the goal.
mhm. Yeah, no, exactly, yeah. But I think, yeah, we're not trying to push getting comfortable with it. We're trying to push the fact that if you see it, it's not a, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" kind of thing. It's more like an, "How can I help?" kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I think getting comfortable with asking those kind of questions, getting comfortable with the discomfort of being there for someone, even if you don't know how you can help, but just holding space for someone, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's what I try to do as far as people who ask me questions or reach out to me online. I just try to hold space for people, because there were years and years where there was no one that was holding space for me, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so I look back at that and I think about, if I had known someone who was speaking candidly like I am now at the time, would I have stopped doing it? I can't say that, and the answer is probably no, if I'm honest, but I would know that there's life outside of it, life beyond it, and that I don't have to feel, on top of feeling, bad about doing it and bad in the moment of doing it, and that sort of loneliness piece that I talked about. I don't have to feel all this like oppressive, overwhelming shame on top of that, you know? Because I think that, um, it's like when you self-harm, you're beating yourself up, right? I mean, at its most you are physically beating yourself up. But then beating yourself up for beating yourself up is a zero-sum game. It doesn't get anyone anywhere. So if we can stop the piece of, if we can, there's a chance to break the cycle if we can hold space for people and let them know that self-injury is neither right nor wrong. It's a choice that you're making, and sort of dispel that shame around it. That was huge for me. I had moved down to Los Angeles to be in a treatment program, and it was I was in the program. It was a residential treatment program, and I had self-harmed for the first time since being in LA, and it was, probably months since being down here. And I was so mortified about having to see my therapist in the program. And I remember, he finally it got through to me in a different way than ever before. And I don't think anyone had articulated it before. He was saying that, look, like, self-injury is, it's neither right nor wrong. And that idea scares people because we want to label things as wrong and bad so that we can scold people, and they can quote unquote learn from it, but if you think about, he put it in the context of, look, it's neither right or wrong, it's a coping mechanism that you're using. And the question then becomes, is it helping you, is it helping you create the life that you want to live? Is it a destructive piece that's not helping that? And it really sort of like freed me from the shame that I had so strongly associated with self-injury. So to be freed from that shame gave me a chance to not compound the cycle by then punishing myself for having harmed myself, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That makes, yeah, no, you're good. My therapist, actually the one that worked. I don't know about you. I went to like seven that or I went to six
Yeah,
that
it's tough.
work, but
So relational.
yeah, exactly. But the seventh one, she said something extremely similar about like the way I reacted to everything, and it kind of just put things into perspective. The problem with some people is, and this is only some, and this is from my own experience, but when they say like what you're doing is wrong, they mean well, but it's just not articulated or worded the right way. They want to say like you need to get help, but when they say that's wrong, you again feel that shame, and it kind of makes you crawl into your hole a little more.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's it's a tough one, but here at the end of the day, here's the thing: like if you are a peer or someone, you don't have to be an expert. It's
No.
a lot of the time it's just they need someone. People need someone to listen, or people need someone to listen to them.
Yeah,
At the end of the day, with no judgment,
100%.
with no
I
judgment.
mean, I don't consider myself an expert on any level. I just, try to rely on my own life experience and try not to speak outside of it. And then take that experience and hopefully, yeah, just try to be there for people and just try to be that listening ear. And then try to, you know, project as much as I can, like a positive and non-judgmental view of these things, just to give a different image of it. So it's not that, um, what you did was bad. It's like it's something you're going through.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. When you first opened up about what you were dealing with, what was that reception like from your like family and friends?
I don't take this for granted at all. My parents have been pretty incredible all along the way, and I know a number of people who have had really strong negative reactions from their parents, and from family. So I don't take it for granted at all that my parents and my siblings have always been, extremely supportive. Now, behind the scenes, I know from anecdotally now how hard it was, for my parents, to cope with it, but they always held a space of unconditional love for me, and that made a massive difference. And I can't encourage people enough, if you know someone who's dealing with self-injury, if you can hold a space that's, unconditional love, or short of that, non-judgment, it goes such a long way. It goes a longer way than you think it's going to go. So yeah, the reception by my family was really great, and they've been very supportive along the way, through the ups and through the, very, very low downs as well.
Mm, awesome. Um, let's talk about that, like those ups and downs for a second. Because I've been following you since you made that aware causes post,
Oh yeah.
with the necklace. And
Yeah.
you made a post about how after 9 years you went back into a facility.
Yeah.
What was going through your head when you admitted yourself back in? Because
Man, I was not excited. I was so frustrated. I felt very ashamed. I felt extremely frustrated. I didn't want to go. It was, my therapist and my psychiatrist were very strongly urging me at the time that it was the right idea. My girlfriend was she wasn't, urging me to go, but she was very, supportive of whatever I needed. And It seemed like it was going to be the right thing to do, but it was hard. I mean, when I had been into treatment before, it was, closer to when I was in college. I was kind of between jobs. I was still living at home with my parents. I wasn't really putting anything on hold, but this time around I had to put my job I had to leave my job, and talk to my boss about leaving work and going on disability, and had to sort of wade through that. And I had to put a writing contract on hold that I was working on. And so it was really, really daunting. Um, and yet it was what I needed, and I'm glad that I listened to the people that I trust, and didn't just rely on my own sense of discomfort, or frustration, or my own, false sense of security, that just because I was out of the woods. Because I landed in the ER a couple times once over the summer, and then once in the fall. But unless and it was strange to me, but unless you say that you are suicidal in the moment, they don't put you on a hold, um, on a psychiatric hold. And I'd been on psychiatric holds before, and I don't recall that, but yeah. So it was like I went home each time, and it was like I was, and took a couple days off, and then was back at work. And it was through the intervention of my therapist and psychiatrist to be like, whoa, 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 let's like unpack
yeah,
what's going on there. And maybe it's a good idea to, even though you feel okay right now, in the wake of that, maybe it's a good idea to put things on hold and really unpack all of this. So it was a really hard decision, um I don't think that should be overlooked, because it's easy to write posts about things after you're done. You know, it's easy to rewrite your own history to be inspirational, and to forget the sort of like, rank sense of shame that you feel, in the moment and through a lot of the process. So I went back into treatment at the end of October, to residential treatment. I was in residential for about 35 days. And then I had never played treatment all the way out. I've been in treatment a number of times, and I always pulled the plug early. Was always like, no, I'm good. I've done the like inpatient or the residential piece, and I'm good. I'm just going to go back to my life. But this time I did the residential, and then I did their outpatient program for a couple of months. And I've just been back at work for 2 weeks now. So I really feel like it was valuable to, since I had the opportunity to really commit to the full timeline of the program. I'm really glad that I made the decision to stick with it.
hmm yeah. This is what I love about it is like you're very open about the fact that it's hard. I was doing a panel, like I was talking to university students last week, and one of the questions was, how have you gotten to this point where you love your, like, how have you fully recovered? I was like, whoa, 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 hold on, hold on, hold on. I have not fully, like, I have not fully recovered. Like, I, people might tell you that it's easy and you can over, because I've had that too. I've had people come on, and I haven't posted their stuff, but I've had people come on where they go, you can think your way out of it and boom, it's gone. And I was like, hold on. I was like, that it's not that easy. And you can't tell people that it's that easy because if once they try that and it might work for some people. I'm not saying it won't because I'm not an expert either. But for the most part, like when I was in my lowest point, a good thought was not going to get me out of it. And it wasn't going to recover me fully. So being open about the fact that, yeah, it sucks. For a long time, it's going to suck. But if you put in the work and you keep working at it, you can get somewhere. That's not to say you can't get down again.
Very true, and I think that's huge to acknowledge. And just because you may go down the well again doesn't negate the progress that you made. Um, it doesn't mean you're back at square one. You're on a different square. You
Yeah.
still have everything you gained. I still have everything I gained from the times I was in treatment before, the therapy I'd done before, and just tanked again this summer and into the fall. Um, Even though, man, it's hard to get to that space where I make there's no illusion around the fact that I wasn't sitting there tanking, in the fall and being like, hey, I still have all the progress I made. It's like, no, it feels like rock bottom again.
Mm.
But you're not without that knowledge, and you are the person you are in that moment. I just because I may have I may have gone down again doesn't mean I'm 18 again, with no knowledge of anything, and about what I was dealing with. And yeah, yeah.
Mhm. That's the problem, right? That's why a lot of people won't get help after is because they have that idea where they go, "Ah, shit, I'm back to square one."
Well, and I think about that too. I mean, I have those thoughts run through my head even now, as far as okay, I finished a round of treatment, therefore I should be fixed. It's like
Mhm.
those thoughts run through my head. I have to be careful around not getting stuck in that kind of thought pattern, or the idea of like I can't fuck up again,
Mm.
um, because I went through treatment and it cost a lot of time, it cost a lot of money, um, it cost a lot of people really investing in their relationship with me to push me to do it. And it can almost get to feeling like there's pressure to succeed because people are watching, and at the end of the day it's like, man, if people are pressuring you to not screw up again, it's the wrong people. And I understand that sometimes those people are people that you can't get away from, as far as like they may be family, they may be close friends. But if you can find a group of people who will hold that space for you of non-judgment and unconditional love, and if you can foster those relationships, that's where the money's at, as far as continued recovery, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, those relationships, you gotta hold on to those ones, man.
Because there's always going to be the other ones.
Right. Yeah, they're everywhere. You can find them anywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, man. Um, so did you get into acting after high school, or was this always like a life goal of yours?
I've always been acting and writing. Even when I was really young. And yeah, I played sports in high school, but I was also still acting in the drama department. College, I majored in creative writing, and I got my degree in creative writing. I was still doing some acting as well, so I've always paired the two. Currently I'm doing more writing than acting at the moment, but I try to keep both balls in the air.
Mhm.
And definitely have kept, was able to keep them in the air together in a big way, doing Vicious Minute when I wrote and performed that.
Yeah, so for the Vicious Minute, was it hard for you to write that at the beginning?
I wrote it when I was in treatment in Los Angeles. We had a group. It was just called the Goals Group, I think, and it was just like it was a breath of fresh air, because set a goal for yourself that's outside of that's not related to your treatment or recovery at all, just something you want to accomplish. And then we'll set goals to accomplish that thing that you want to get done. So I had said I wanted to write a play about my experiences with self-injury and growing up in the environment that I grew up in, and wrote it in kind of in pieces. I wouldn't say that it was hard to write it, other than the fact that writing is just really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And articulating, kind of like I was struggling to answer your question earlier, at the start of the interview about, well, what are the feelings or thoughts that go through your head in that moment? So working to articulate those things was difficult. But I look back at the writing now, and I'm so grateful to have it, because I wrote it at a particular time in my life when I was dealing with self-injury in a particular way. um, and I'm really grateful to have that writing now, because if I wrote it now, I would write it from a completely different vantage point. So I'm very, very grateful to have that as a document and as a performed and performable piece,
Mm-hmm.
that I think speaks more to really being in the trenches with it, than I am now.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't still have my struggles today.
Yeah. Yeah. Art's a great way to, well, you hear it all the time. Art's a great way to express how you feel. It's a great way to let out some stuff. Like, I know they always suggest journaling. Like, it's not art per se, but it's another form of art in the sense it's writing. But
Yeah,
any expressive way to talk about how you feel or talk about your journey, like it's beneficial for you, and it's also beneficial for people who might watch it or read it or listen to it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, journaling has been. You talk about journaling. Journaling's been um, great for me, and yeah, it's got to be one of the most literal forms of self-expression. And when I have a chance to do it. I mean, this last time that I was in treatment a couple of months ago, I journaled a ton. And part of it was to fill space that, if I was feeling uncomfortable, I would just journal. And Yeah, it's been nothing but beneficial for me, as far as um, getting thought. Gosh, having thoughts running around in your head all the time, getting them out of your system can be so helpful, even if it seems too simple.
Hmm. Yeah, just seeing them on paper. I
Yeah.
remember when I first wrote about how I wanted to die, I saw it on paper. I was like, wow, I really let that power get to my, or I really let that those words have that much power in my head. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, because our minds are such limitless spaces, and things can grow and get fucking massive
Mm.
in there. And yet, if I'm able to articulate it on paper, it's like, pinning the butterfly down, and I can see it. Um, I can see it for what it is, and not to this monster that it's grown inside my mind.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. When you were acting and trying to go for roles, did your scars ever hold you back from certain roles, or was there kind of like an understanding there?
It's only ever held me back in my own mind. I don't know for sure, as far as like things that I haven't gotten, if it's held me back, but not as far as like people telling me,
Mm.
It's definitely was something that I really struggled with, as far as um I think through college and after college, about like, I was just, I dealt with, even once I was comfortable wearing short sleeves, which was um like before, like into my senior year of college. um I had a chance to. I went away for the summer. I did a theater apprenticeship on the East Coast, and I was around a bunch of people that I didn't know, had never met me. So I was like, all right, here we go. Gonna rip the band-aid off and just wear short sleeves, and that's just gonna be how they know me, you know. So after that point, that was a huge relief to sort of get into that space of being getting over that sort of shame and embarrassment and nervousness hump to being able to wear short sleeves again. But then there's always still context, acting being one of them, where it's like, oh God, am I going to be judged for this? Am I going to be, yeah, what am I gonna, are people gonna pigeonhole me because I look a certain way? So, and it's definitely something that I still wrestle with. And to be honest with you, I don't know if, a piece of that is why I've, been writing more lately, because I still feel that. But I try to pair both, and I try to not let it get to me. And at the end of the day, God, it kind of is what it is. I have a lot of scars, and they're not going anywhere. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's up to me to continue to find ways to honor my experience and love myself, and in whatever way that I can be comfortable in my own skin.
mhm. Was there a moment for you where you kind of realized you were starting to get to that self-love and comfort? Because I know it's a never-ending journey, but was there ever a moment where you were like, "I'm actually not that uncomfortable wearing short sleeves anymore?"
I mean, I think that summer of 2009 was a huge turning point, because it allowed me then to go back to my life in Northern California with that sort of freedom, because people didn't judge me for it when I was back east. It was just, some people asked, some people didn't. Some people later down the line, when I was back in touch with them again, said they hadn't even noticed, which I kind of call bullshit on. But it's fine if not noticing means that, or if they're equating not noticing with just like not caring, then that's amazing,
Mhm.
and if they didn't notice, that's great too. So that summer honestly was a massive turning point as far as my comfort level. That said, I mean, I'm very, very conscious of my scars still today, and um get asked about them, and usually people are great, and I try to take it as an opportunity um to raise awareness. I try to be as honest as I can, even if it's in brief interactions. And people will ask casually, because usually people think I've gotten in an accident or something. But they'll ask very casually, and I'll respond and tell them that I struggled with cutting and burning myself for a long time. And without fail, see the embarrassment wash over their face for having asked. And it's like, that's the cycle that I want to break. So I immediately let them know that it's fine, that I wouldn't wear short sleeves if I wasn't comfortable talking about it, that it is what it is. And I hope that those little seeds are, or I hope that those are seeds that are being planted, as far as like one more person who has met someone who's dealt with that, and it wasn't taboo. That person, me, I was, I answered honestly, and I'm not saying that people are all different parts of their journeys with dealing with self-harm, and I wouldn't blame people for saying I'm not comfortable talking about it. I wouldn't blame people for getting upset for asking about it. I mean, I'm trying to think of a context where I would ask someone about scars on their body in a grocery store checkout line, because that's where I get asked most often. um, and I'm like, I just don't imagine that I would do that,
I
so I don't blame people for if they got upset, whatever. But since I'm comfortable talking about it, I'll take it as an opportunity, because there were, like I've said, years and years where I wasn't comfortable. And, I want to be a voice for those people who are still not comfortable. And who knows? Someone asked me about it, and that person may know someone who they think's dealing with it, and now they've met someone who is kind of on the other side of it. So I don't know what role I'm playing, if any, but I try to take things as an opportunity to be a positive, about something that does, like you said earlier, have a dark cloud around it,
Mhm.
only because we're afraid of it.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely planting seeds, man. I was talking to a guy, his name's Terry Dunnage. He's from the UK.
Uh huh.
He's a burn victim. He was in a
Mm,
house fire, and he was telling me that
okay.
the biggest question that he got was people come up to him and go, "What the fuck happened to you?" And, like, when he told me that, it was just like, who does that? Who actually, like,
Yeah.
it's just such a weird concept to me because I would never do that. It's so strange that, and I'm sure some of them meant well, but it's such a weird way to go about it.
Yeah, it's very odd. I don't Yeah, again, I don't know what motivates people, but if they're going to ask, I'm going to give them an answer,
Mhm.
and it's going to make them uncomfortable.
And they asked, so
and and I'm not trying to make them uncomfortable, and I try to reassure people afterward, or after I give them the answer. But at the end of the day, it's also not my job to make people feel okay with something that makes them uncomfortable. But I do want to, I want to do right by my younger self, as far as, I didn't know what I was dealing with. So, yeah, if we can keep talking about these things, maybe people who don't know what they're dealing with will have more of an avenue to find out, and love themselves sooner.
mm, yeah, what you just yeah, that's powerful, man. That's why, like, for me, that's why I do what I do, because growing up as a
Mm,
kid, I
mhm.
had no one to look up to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that, where someone's like, "Yeah, I went through it. It fucking sucked, but I'm still here." So,
Well, and that's a big piece of it for me, is not sugarcoating it,
mhm.
not whitewashing it. Um, I really have no patience for you know bumper sticker psychology,
Yep.
as far as just inane positivity. It's just not reality, and that I don't feel like I need to say, as far as, like, based on my experience. It's like, no, objectively, it's not reality. So to really honor the struggle of it, I think is very important. I think we're doing a disservice to people if we don't. Um, Doing a disservice to ourselves, to our own struggle. If we don't acknowledge our own struggle, then what the hell?
Yeah, no, I feel you, man. I can't tell you how many times I've had to turn Instagram off just because I see that what you're talking about, the sugar coating. I'm like, listen, I get it. That's what'll get you the most likes or whatever you're reaching for, but it's not realistic. It really isn't.
Yeah. So to continue to really drive, and not to be overly
Mhm.
negative, or I also don't want to drag people into the, salacious, dirty details of whatever my issues have been, where it's like, and I think about that a lot with the images that I post about, that are of my scars. Try to post them in really specific contexts, as far as, like, I try to I want to post things that are frank and realistic and honest, but I also don't want to drag people down, or as best I can, not trigger people. Obviously scars are going to be somewhat triggering to some people, but I do think there's a if I'm comfortable with it, I do take it as a sense of responsibility to be realistic, and to be honest. And um but yeah, I think trying to walk that line, of not being overly positive, but also not triggering people in a deliberate way. So yeah, it's not always an easy line to walk. But I think conversations like this are a part of walking that line and are great for that.
Yeah, it's a very thin tightrope line, man.
Yeah, 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 I agree.
um so I to end this episode off, let's I've got two last kind of questions that I was thinking about. So on the one side, let's say you're a family member or a friend of someone who it you like they haven't openly talked to you about it, but you know that they self-harm, like you've seen
Hmm.
the scars or like something. How would that person go about, one, like reaching out to that person and being like, "Hey, listen, like I'm here for," like how does one go about that?
That's a great question, and it's not always one that I even know how to answer. I think the two things I would say are you don't need to address it explicitly with the person. As far as like, you know, hey, I've noticed you've been cutting yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily something you need to do. I think the most important thing, the second piece, is just being there for that person, holding space for that person, letting them know that they can talk to you. Um, and not just letting them know that they can talk to you, actually living that out and listening to it. Because I can't tell you, the number of people who are like, hey, over the years who have been like, hey, I'll be there for you whenever, you can always talk to me, and then they just aren't there. And honestly, I'm not here to like put those people on blast, or say that they're bad people. But if you want to be there for someone, you have to be there for someone. You actually have to hold that space for them. So I think unconditional love is the biggest piece, um, because that allows people to open up,
Mhm.
and come out of their shell, and whatever that looks like for the relationship that you're in, or the relationship you have to someone. um, Unconditional love means listening when it's hard. Unconditional love means not shaming. It means it could mean a number of different things, at the same time. But I think that's the biggest piece. Non-judgment, and non-judgment is maybe just another word for it, you know. Um, but holding that non-judgmental space as best as you can, holding that line as best as you can. It's hard.
Mm.
It's hard, especially if it's someone that you love and care about, and gosh, it's hard. So I don't want to sugarcoat that either. That piece of being someone on the outside looking in, it can be such a helpless, frustrating, scary space to be in. But if you can take care of yourself, and then provide that space for the person, um, I think that's the goal, and that'll reap the most rewards, and the biggest benefit for both of you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I've had people in my life too, and I don't want to put them on blast either, but when they were like, "Listen, you can talk to me about anything." And I was like, "Okay, well, this." And they're like, "Well, I don't want to talk about that." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" Like, well, you
Yeah.
just said like it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but don't tell me you want
Oh
to.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Because there's some dark things that need to be talked about, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah.
Some hard things that need to be talked about. Things that aren't easy to talk about, you know? Not just aren't easy to live with, but things that are difficult as hell to talk about. So, if you say you're open to someone, talking to you about whatever, contemplate what whatever looks like for you.
Mhm.
And that could look like different things for different people. So, but contemplate how it's going to be heard by the person. If you say whatever, me personally, I'm gonna take it as okay. I also think for people who are dealing with self harm or mental health issues, um, it's also a good idea to protect yourself, and be careful about who it is you choose to open up to, because sometimes opening up to the wrong person can do more harm than good, and has the capacity to be a detriment to your well-being. So just I don't say that as a deterrent to opening up at all, but open up to people who you can trust. And if it turns out that, like, you try and turns out that you can't, that person isn't there for you, don't take that on personally as a reflection of, do your best to not take that on personally as a reflection of what you're going through or how you spoke about it. Yeah, I think those are also important things to be aware of,
Hmm.
because it's not as simple as, I mean, like you're saying too, it's not as simple as, it's not always as simple as, like, hey, you can talk to me about anything, and then, like, I talk to you about anything, and then everything's golden.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of different facets of it.
Hmm. I think the other thing for, like, because I'm not an expert again, and I try to emphasize that all the time. But
Yeah,
like in my personal experience, I think on the listening end of it, what some people in my life have done is they put this unrealistic pressure on themselves to not have like discomfort or judgment about what I'm talking about, and then that in turn kind of not turns them off from being there as a support, but it kind of it's exhausting for them because they're fighting this discomfort by saying I shouldn't feel that way. He's my friend, blah blah blah. But being able to just accept, yes, this makes me uncomfortable, but I'm still there for them. Like that takes away at least some of the exhaustion.
that's huge. I mean, that's huge. I feel like that's very well put. I mean, that's real life.
Yeah, yeah, man. Let's get uncomfortable. Let's do it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so my last question for you, Ben, because obviously there's a lot of people going through struggles, and in the case of excuse me, in the case of like self harm, a lot of people go, uh, they stay in hiding almost. I don't want to say that, but like they don't, they're not open about
yeah,
it, and they're kind of struggling in silence. If you had the opportunity to talk to these younger people, let's say like high school, because this happens a lot in high school, what would you want to
yeah.
say to someone who is going through that and wants to open up but is terrified to?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I would say that if you can find one person who you can talk to about what you're going through, to whatever degree you want to talk to them about it, doesn't have to be full on everything that you're going through. Um, and I would also say that, I'm a testament to the fact that it's possible to move past these things, even, and, again, not be 100% free of them. I don't think that's realistic, for me personally, as far as I still have thoughts about these things. But it is possible to get to higher ground, as far as where you don't feel like you're um, drowning in it. And I think I would just try to remind them of that, and remind them daily of it. I think it's so hard, especially when you're younger, to, especially in high school and middle school, and you know um, dealing with something like self-harm. I really feel for everyone who's dealing with that, even now. um, I think that, yeah, I mean, it's just such a hard question to answer. I think just knowing that, from me to whoever is listening to this, that it is possible, that you aren't, that it's not something that's insurmountable, and that there are people who are out there who have also dealt with it. It can be such an isolating, it is an isolating practice, because what do? I hurt myself, and then I cover myself, and and then I not only cover myself with clothing, whether it be long sleeves, long pants, I then, I feel isolated from other people. But knowing that there are voices out there that that are telling you that you can get through it, and there are voices out there, and you may not find them quickly, but voices out there who are non-judgmental, because the majority of the time, at least right now, you're going to encounter judgment. And I think remembering that you're not a bad person, you're not a bad person just because you deal with something, as explicit as self-injury, you're not a bad person. And taking that to the bank, because again, like I said earlier, try not to beat yourself up for beating yourself up. That's been huge for me. There's a chance to break the cycle. There's a chance to break the cycle that way. So that's what I would say.
Love it, man. Where can my viewers find you?
Probably the easiest place is on Instagram. My handle is the first letter of my first name followed by my last name. It's at B as in Ben, Moroski, Moroski. I
love it, man. Well, listen, Ben, before we cap it all off, I really appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you as a person. I really think what you're doing is going to help a lot of people. So thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Harry. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, it'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.